I never expected a phone call to stop me from holding my own sister's hand while she gave birth. Yet there I was, 3 hours into a drive, heart pounding, car tires gripping the wet asphalt, and my mom's voice on speaker piercing the quiet. "Don't come," she said. "She doesn't want you here. If you dare come inside, we'll make you regret it." But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. I froze. The hospital was only minutes away. I could see the parking lot in my mind, the familiar automatic doors, the fluorescent lights flickering over the linoleum floors. But her words anchored me to the curb, disbelief mixing with a sudden, cold fear. Why would she say that? My sister, Sarah, my best friend, my childhood ally, the one who had always protected me when Mom's anger flared, didn't want me at the most important moment of her life? It didn't make sense. It couldn't. I remember gripping the steering wheel, knuckles white, and asking myself, am I really not allowed to be here? My mind raced with questions that had no answers. Had Sarah changed? Had she really asked Mom to key me out? Or was this some twisted power play I didn't understand? And what about Dad? Why was he silent on the phone? I could feel my chest tighten, a heavy mix of panic, hurt, and confusion threatening to spill over. By the time I reached the hospital entrance, I was shaking. I didn't move. I didn't walk in. Instead, I sat in the empty hospital cafeteria, staring at the cold linoleum floor, trying to make sense of a family that suddenly felt like strangers. Every laugh echoing down the corridor, every announcement over the intercom, cut me deeper. And then, strangers, Jane and David sat across from me, noticing the tears I couldn't stop. They didn't know my story, yet their kindness was immediate, disarming, and strange. What I didn't know then, while I sat alone and humiliated, was that this moment, this quiet, painful, terrifying moment, was the start of a chain of events that would redefine what family truly meant. Years later, at my wedding, everything would come crashing together. My parents, my sister, and even I would be forced to confront the secrets that had been buried, the choices that had been made, and the people who had quietly become my real family. I parked the car a few feet from the hospital entrance, my hands still trembling on the steering wheel. I could see the sliding doors through the windshield, a small crowd of visitors coming and going, all of them laughing, talking, living moments I wasn't allowed to share. I wanted to run inside, to rush to Sarah's side, to tell her I was there, that I loved her, that nothing, no fight, no argument, could ever keep me from her. But Mom's words echoed so loudly in my head that I couldn't move. "If you dare come inside, we'll make you regret it." The threat wasn't subtle. It wasn't emotional blackmail. It was pure, cold intimidation. I ended up in the hospital cafeteria, sliding into a corner booth, my hands hiding my face as tears started to flow. My chest hurt like I had been punched repeatedly. I could hear other families celebrating, nurses calling out room numbers, babies crying. It was a soundtrack of life I had been banned from. And there I was, frozen, invisible, holding on to a hurt I couldn't even name. How could my own mother say such a thing about my own sister? And why would Sarah agree to it? As I sat, head in my hands, a couple a few tables away noticed me. They were mid-conversation, sipping coffee, and one of them leaned over with a gentle voice. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Do you want to sit with us?" I wanted to refuse, to hide my shame, to disappear entirely. But the warmth in their eyes, the unspoken offer of empathy, broke through my walls. I whispered, my family, and the words choked me. They didn't press. They just nodded and gestured for me to join them. For the first time in hours, maybe the first time that day, I felt a tiny spark of relief. I told them fragments of what happened, the drive, the phone call, the threat, and they listened. No judgment. No one telling me I was overreacting. Just presence. And yet, even as I sat with them, part of me was still in that hallway, still imagining Sarah behind that closed door, wondering if she was hurt, scared, or even thinking about me. Little did I know, the kindness of two strangers that day was the first domino in a chain that would redefine family forever. They had no idea that years later, this small act of compassion would turn into something permanent, a bond stronger than the one I had been denied at birth. And I had no idea that by the time I left that cafeteria, my life and the concept of family itself would be quietly shifting beneath me. Years passed, but I never forgot that day in the hospital cafeteria. The memory was sharp, like a photograph etched into my mind: the fluorescent lights, the faint hum of the intercom, the strangers who didn't ask questions but simply offered me comfort when my own family had locked me out. Jane and David, the couple who had noticed my tears, weren't just kind. They were quietly extraordinary. I didn't realize it at the time, but that fleeting act of kindness was the beginning of a connection that would reshape my life entirely. Life at home continued to be complicated. My parents' control and hostility didn't stop after the hospital incident. Every birthday, every family gathering, every little choice felt like a battlefield. Sarah seemed to drift further away, and I began to realize that the family I had always relied on was unreliable in ways I hadn't fully comprehended. I tried to stay strong, but there were moments when the weight of their rejection nearly crushed me. And in those moments, I thought about Jane and David, the strangers who had let me cry without judgment, who had offered me the simplest thing I had been denied: acceptance. Over time, our connection deepened. We stayed in touch, sharing pieces of our lives slowly. I confided in them, and they believed in me when my own family seemed to doubt my worth. When the opportunity came, they stepped in ways that went beyond friendship. They helped me navigate legal paperwork, guided me through emotional battles, and eventually, in an act that still feels surreal to me, signed documents to become my legal family. My parents had tried to control me, tried to dictate my place in the world. But legally, officially, they could no longer claim that power. It was strange, even almost ironic, that my sanctuary had come from the very strangers I hadn't known, rather than the people who had given me life. And yet, the more I embraced this new family, the more I realized that family wasn't always blood. Sometimes, it was people who chose to stand by you when everyone else turned away. But just as I began to feel a sense of belonging, I had no idea that years later, at my wedding, the very people who had once rejected me would discover the truth about Jane and David, and the shock of that revelation would be explosive. The day of my wedding arrived like a storm I had long prepared for. Months of planning, dress fittings, and endless checklists had built up to this single moment, and yet, nothing could have prepared me for the emotional turbulence that was about to unfold. I walked down the aisle, heart pounding, sunlight streaming through the chapel windows, and tried to focus on the man waiting at the altar. But my mind kept flickering back to the cafeteria years ago, to Jane and David, and the unspoken promise that they had quietly kept, that I would have a family who loved me unconditionally. As the ceremony progressed, friends and extended relatives smiled and whispered, unaware of the hidden tension that hovered just beneath the surface. My parents, Linda and Mark, sat stiffly in their pews, glancing at each other, faces tight with the subtle strain of control they had always tried to maintain. They had no idea that the most significant revelation of the day was still to come. When it came time to formalize the legalities, I felt a thrill of quiet defiance. Jane and David stepped forward, signing the paperwork that officially made them my legal guardians. There was a pause, a collective breath held by everyone in the room, before my parents' expressions twisted from curiosity into outright shock. The same parents who had barred me from seeing my sister in labor were now confronted with a truth they could not undo. Their power, their control, their threats, they were irrelevant in the face of this legal and emotional reality. For a few tense seconds, the chapel was silent except for the faint scratching of pen on paper. Then, whispers rippled through the crowd. My mom's jaw tightened. My dad's eyes darted around, searching for a way to reclaim authority. But there was none. For the first time in my life, I was untouchable by their anger, untouched by their manipulations. I smiled quietly to myself, a strange mix of liberation and vindication washing over me. I had survived their cruelty, outgrown their toxic control, and built a family based on love and choice. The irony wasn't lost on me. The strangers who had comforted a crying girl in a cafeteria had become the people who truly held my heart. And in that moment, as my parents sat frozen and helpless, I realized something I had always known deep down. Sometimes, the family you choose loves you louder than the one you're born into. But what neither they nor I knew was that this revelation was only the beginning of a series of emotional reckonings that would follow long after the ceremony ended. Looking back, it's almost surreal to think how a single phone call changed the course of my life. That moment at the hospital, when my mom's words stopped me from seeing my sister give birth, felt like the end of the world. I was crushed, isolated, and humiliated in a place that should have been full of joy. But that moment of heartbreak became the catalyst for something far greater than I could have imagined. It pushed me into the care of people who chose me, believed in me, and, in the quietest ways, saved me from the weight of a family that refused to love me the way I deserved. Jane and David weren't just strangers in a hospital cafeteria. They became my sanctuary, my chosen family, the people who would hold me up when the people I was born to let me fall. And when they signed those legal papers on my wedding day, the culmination of years of love, trust, and loyalty finally confronted my parents with a truth they had tried so hard to deny. Love isn't controlled by blood. Power isn't guaranteed by authority. And those who try to manipulate with fear will often find themselves powerless in the face of the bonds we choose to nurture. That day, standing at the altar, I felt something I hadn't felt for decades: freedom. Freedom from judgment, from threats, from the constant push and pull of a family that couldn't see me for who I really am. I realized that life doesn't always give us perfect families. Sometimes it gives us the people we need to survive, to thrive, and to feel truly seen. And sometimes, the people who hurt us the most end up teaching us the greatest lessons, not intentionally, but through the choices we make afterward. So, if you've ever felt rejected, shut out, or unseen by those who are supposed to love you, remember this: your story doesn't end there. The love you deserve may come from the most unexpected places. And sometimes, the people who notice your tears, who offer kindness when you're most broken, are the ones who will redefine your life. I'll never forget my mom's warning that day: if you dare come inside, we'll make you regret it. What I learned instead is this: sometimes, the people who try to break you inadvertently lead you to the life you were always meant to have. And sometimes, the family you choose becomes the family that truly matters. Have you ever been shut out by someone you loved? Comment below and share your story, because sometimes, the people who seem like strangers can change your life forever.